Okay, good evening, everybody who's joining us online. My name is Stefanie Hessler. I'm the director of Kunsthall Trondheim, and I'm very happy to be the Beauty of Oil Research Collective, this event, Plankton and Drill Head. We had originally planned for the event to take place partly on site here in Trondheim and partly online. We decided, because of recent government recommendations, to hold the event only online for audiences. However, we have two speakers here tonight, so I'm very happy about that. The collaboration started with the Goethe-Institut and Martin Bach in Oslo, approaching us because he had been in contact with Beauty of Oil and asking us if we wanted to collaborate on this project. And we felt like it made a lot of sense in connection to our current exhibition titled Who Wants to Live Forever? And in the exhibition, we ask questions of how our own life on this planet is being affected when the climate and the material conditions around us change, and who prolonged life is for, who has access to technologies, and what any timeframes mean actually in the Anthropocene when the environment is altered to an extensive degree. And so, yeah, Benjamin Steininger and Alexander Klose are the research collective Beauty of Oil, and they are based in Vienna and Berlin and are joining us tonight from their homes. And yeah, Beauty of Oil started many years ago actually, and has been looking into the petromodernity and carbon fuels. And Benjamin and Alexander have published a book recently and are preparing an exhibition at the Kunstmuseum in Wolfsburg, Germany next year, where they also go into the beauty and horror of oil and the petro age. And this kind of format that we're watching, format where speakers are brought together to discuss, and where we also see images and film material that is being added to the conversation remotely in this case. With us tonight here at Kunsthall Trondheim are Siri Granum Carson, who's the director of NTNU Ocean. We're very happy that you could be here, as well as Finn Sandberg, who's a civil engineer, marine technologist, and previously the academic director at the Norwegian Petroleum Museum. Great to have you here. Thank you for coming. And online, besides Alexander and Benjamin, we're tonight joined by Julia Leder, professor of film studies, the Department of Art and Media Studies, also at NTNU in Trondheim, and the artist Gunhild Watten, who's also an associate professor at the Faculty of Technology, Art and Design at Oslo Met, the Oslo Metropolitan University. And yeah, one more time, thank you for organizing this, Alexander and Benjamin, and also to the Goethe-Institut in Oslo. And I'm very excited to see what will happen next. Thank you.
Thank you, Steffi, and thank you also to Martin Bach and Goethe-Institut and Klose.
I'm Benjamin Steininger, and I will now share my screen with you. So that's where we start. Plankton and Drill Head. The title of this evening is provoked by a banknote draft of the designer Ellen Karen Melum, and the draft was produced in a competition for new Norwegian banknotes. Unfortunately, didn't win, but what it shows is almost a cosmos. It's a microorganism, plankton, and it's a drill head, a technological piece. It's the microcosmos, it's a macrocosmos. And banknotes is not coins, but still, who has experience with coins is archaeologists. And from one coin, they can decipher a whole historical period, a whole empire, as what we see here with this coin showing Charles the Great. Archaeology deals with great cultural correlations and with cosmologies. So what do our banknotes show? What cosmos do they reveal?
Well, on the one side, we see the history of nature as shown in the plankton and its age-old development. And plankton also is one of the main organic bases from which oil was formed 150 million years ago. So that's probably why it got onto that banknote there design. And on the other hand, we see the history of technology and culture, so to say, a maximum of this history actually, because the oil industry and the whole extraction business is one of the most complex endeavors that has been produced by humans in history. And we found it very striking and interesting that those two histories are brought together on a banknote design.
Actually, when we were for the first time in Stavanger, we also went to the Oljedirektorat and brought these spectacular images from real plankton from there. And it is so fascinating that this industry, this technological endeavor, also deciphers natural history. There's quite a famous concept by a German zoologist, Erich Haeckel. He talked about the art forms. Yeah.
Benjamin, may I shortly interrupt? This plankton is also 150 million years old, as far as I remember, because it's from drill cores. So it's, you know, from the material that they bring up. It's from very far down the earth.
Yeah. So it's not an actual. It looks like an actual organism, but it's not. It's really an organism way back.
Yeah, you're right.
that's a very present association, and that's actually very much to the point, because we only deal with very present associations when we deal with this type of history. And our association before was that this type of plankton could look like a coronavirus or like a technical tool. And there is a famous model for thinking like this, and it's Erich Haeckel's art forms in nature. He put together pictures of organisms. Here we see so-called diatoms, also marine microorganisms, and he saw the beauty and the almost technical beauty in these microorganisms. And when we put this together now with the banknote drafts, then we could maybe see the triangle of the technicality of organisms, the organicality, and also the beauty of the technological apparatus, and in a very strange way, the concept that wealth, what a banknote stands for, just comes from the ocean and from the ocean bed, not in its actual appearance, but so from the fossil natural history of Norway. Here we see a presentation from the a drill head animation from the Norwegian Oil Museum. And this is actually quite exactly what this Ernst Haeckel book also shows, that you cannot really tell whether this is a natural organism or a technical apparatus. So, what interests us?
One thing I want to add, we called that in correspondence to Haeckel's art forms in nature, this would be the natural forms of technology. And they are there's a mirror imaging of these two different aesthetics, at least in this area that we are researching. So to sum up, what we are aiming for is an archaeology of the presence, and the materials that we look at with this kind of long distance view of archaeologists are materials that are from way back, as well as materials that are very contemporary, and that can also be symbolic forms or cultural forms of the present. So we would call that a materialistic and materials-based method to decipher the diverse elements, layers, representations, and the whole of petromodernity, where petromodernity is a term that has been coined maybe 15 years ago, and now has become quite common, that is meaning like the whole of how societies are all around the world and individuals were heavily influenced by the legacy, so to say, of petrol energy and petrol material-based technologies. So, Benjamin.
Yeah, and we as cultural historians, as philosophers of technology, and also as curators, we approach this petromodern totality, let's say, with a bundle of different approaches and formats. And theoretical and curatorial research in excursions, like today, as where we travel to Trondheim, but also in real excursions, in text, in video montages, in small public formats like this type of Petro salon, which was normally designed for the non-digital world. And as Stefanie said, we in these weeks we published a book, an atlas of Petromodernity, and next year we will curate a big art exhibition at the Kunstmuseum Wolfsburg. So to tackle petromodernity, we need to use a very wide variety of approaches
and tools.
So the plan of this night, Alexander?
So tonight we want to ask in this way that we try to introduce maybe more in contemporary endeavors, how Norway has been transformed by petromodernity, how it deals with its status as an extremely successful extraction country that at the same time tries to leave this legacy of oil today, how it prepares for a possibly carbon-free future, and how all this is represented in different public discourses. So we will ask from a petroculture comparative perspective, as we would call that, how does Norwegian society cope with the ambivalent legacy of oil? What are the grand narratives that were established to lead Norway into petromodernity and beyond? And how have they changed? And the plan for this evening, the exact plan, is that we have all in all 4 chapters or 4 rounds. And in each, in the first 3 chapters, we always have 1, or in one case 2 experts and communication partners who will present a short input. In the first chapter, it will be Finn Sandberg. The first chapter is called World Heritage. Second chapter is called Lykkeland, and it will be presented by Julia Leda. And the third chapter is called Nation Building or Nation Rebuilding. So the re is in brackets in between. And it's with Gudrun Button and Siri Granum Carson. And in each chapter, we will have an internal response round between us all. And in 2 chapters, Benjamin and I prepared a kind of an interlude to kind of widen, like we said, petroculture comparatively widen the perspective. And then in the final section, we would like to come back to these banknote designs and look at a couple of other of these designs, also by other artists, because we think that they really bring together quite a lot of these different strings and layers and perspectives on how to look at, analyze, and try to understand petromodern presences, so to say. And we hope that this will maybe also be a good basis to then open the final discussion and open it to all the hundreds of people that may now watch outside on Zoom all over the world, whom we are greeting by this. By the way, do we know how many people are actually logged into this Zoom conference? Because I can't see anything. Do we know it? Carl?
Looks like 25 attendees.
Wow.
25 from 3 continents.
Where do you see that? How can you see that?
Under participants.
Down there. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so we start with the first part, I guess, huh?
Yes, and now I think I stop this. And it's a real pleasure to introduce Finn Sandberg. He's the speaker of the first part, World Heritage. When we met Finn Sandberg for the first time at a workshop about energy archives in Stavanger in 2018, he was both chief curator at the Norwegian Oil Museum and mastermind of the idea to designate sites of petro-industry as part of UNESCO World Heritage. He will present about that now. He spent decades as a practitioner in the oil industry with the practical design of huge concrete platforms. And from what we experienced in a long car trip through various sites in Stavanger, which he showed us, he's an engineer by training and a historian by heart. Thank you very much, Finn, that you made it to Trondheim.
Big applause.
Thank you. The idea of the World Heritage was combined with the interest of what has really influenced Norway, from the Viking ships through, might say, Middle Age, Vigelandsparken, and things that are very particular for Norway. The oil industry came to Norway in the 60s, but the really Norwegian footprint of oil production was through the concrete platforms. I think I made some pictures that was supposed to be the background, but I don't know. Okay, somebody said it was going to be okay, but I have to speak without those pictures then. There are 14 huge structures. The smallest one in 100 meters of waters, and the largest one is on 300 meters of water. The one I talked with Alex and Benjamin was the Draugen platform, which is a monotower, which is a single structure that I thought could be brought back from the 270 meters of water where it's producing right now, right west of us almost. The height of that platform is about 350 meters altogether. The weight matter. It weighs only about 600,000 tons. The largest structure, the heaviest one, is 1.5 million tons of concrete. And these structures are the largest one ever moved by people. There is a taller building in Abu Dhabi right now, but that's never been moved. It's fixed to the ground. These concrete structures are movable. And it's a very special design that is typical of Norway. And since I met Alex and Benjamin in about 2.5 years ago, that's when the oil production is going down in Norway. Are we going to leave these structures anywhere? Oh, very few people in Norway have actually been onto a platform. I mean, there is about 50,000 people that have been, here's the pictures. They also represent platforms which have been producing more than half of the Norwegian oil.
Excuse me to interrupt. Can we also see them on shared screen? So
yeah, now I think you have the shared screen.
No, we don't.
It's okay. The others can't see it.
Can you see them? No.
Yeah, I can see them on the screen behind me. All right.
Yeah. But this screen, unfortunately, is not shared with the rest of the world.
So you get the picture me in front of these platforms, but I guess that's
that's forbidden. Nah,
yeah,
there we have it.
If you have it here, this is a Draugen platform. It's a 270 meters. The largest one is this one. It's a troll platform. The reason was, why shouldn't we be proud of the oil production that we had? Because it's engineering and it's a technology behind it. It might be, I mean, we said oil may be dirty, oil may be polluting, but these structures are very typical. And as an engineer, of course, I'd like to show off Norwegian engineership. It is possible to move these structures. Unfortunately, UNESCO has a rule that says you can't move structures from the place where they're producing. So my idea was to have it, one of them taken to shore and the other ones in offshore. If there is a picture, if you could move one, I had also sent a couple of ones. First time it was introduced was 2001, when people say, are we going to safeguard a platform? Where, of course, Draugen is where it is. Take another one. This is an area to be considered part of the whole world heritage. It must be representing a unique cultural and natural historical. There is nothing else in the world which is more unique than these structures. So I used the whole thing to say that maybe Draugen should be one because it's a beauty. It's our Eiffel Tower. It's the same structure, if you might see it here, or the one single one. But then they said you can't move it. Then we have the next picture. There are some other ideas on, this is where it's not movable. This, I can perhaps stand up here, is an area where almost all of the platform is positioned. From the Statfjord fields in the north, to the Troll, and to the Frigg area in here. It is possible to have it out there. They say, why should we have a UNESCO platforms out in the sea where nobody can see it? Well, there's a UNESCO heritage project also on the bottom of the sea. So why should we have a structure that you could actually visit by sailing across? If you have the next picture. This is one of the platforms which is left out there in the sea. They've taken off the fabrication, and you can only see the concrete structures. The size of it, well, you see some seagulls over here, so you have a certain idea of the largeness. It could be possible to leave also the factory on top on one of these to have it actually to be able to visit it as a UNESCO heritage. And maybe if you use the local structures, and you have the next one. This is where it's built. These are the structures. There is one leaning tower that was built as a test piece, how to slip form the concrete, which is still there. It's the leaning tower. It used to be the most leaning building in the world until the Arabs said they're going to beat us. But it has an angle of almost 20 degrees leaning. The pizza tower is only about 12 degrees. It could be used as a showcase for the birthplace of the concretes. And if you have, I think there is a last one. This is the Norwegian oil platform on our present 500 kroner bill. Do you see the platform?
Yeah.
It's right here. This is a platform that we use as a picture or indicating the oil history. And I think that's what I was at least going to introduce to you. I don't know if you had any more ideas and you have more questions, I could try to answer them.
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't know if we want to have direct questions here, or should we? I think we move on and then put the direct questions into the Q&A. Alexander, should we do that?
Yeah, I guess so. That was our plan.
Yeah. So you also already mentioned the. I think, Alexander, you need to start now with the presentation. So you mentioned already the Pisa Tower, the Pisa Tower, and all the other UNESCO sites. And this is quite an interesting aspect of, if you put something into the UNESCO family, then this comes with other family members. And
damn it.
We want now to speculate a little bit what would happen if we turn the oil infrastructure into World Heritage. What are then the relatives of this, and what is then the, let's say, the memorial context? So a quick ride around times and places. The present shapes what counts as history, in good or in bad. In fact, already a lot of cultural existing UNESCO heritage sites around the world have already a close connection to oil.
So they are not called that.
They're not called that. Next one.
No, does it work like that? Yeah.
So this is not a UNESCO heritage site, and we don't know how the real Tower of Babel may have looked like. But if there was one, then it must have been put together with bitumen as some kind of cement, as people in Mesopotamia built their roads, but also the huge buildings.
Benjamin, shortly, we took these photographs at the storage rooms of the Pergamon Museum in Berlin. So they have drawers full of these old Mesopotamian stones with bitumen on the sides, which is kind of nice.
So already the oldest history of building, and also some of the oldest art pieces in the British Museum, such as this lion head from Mesopotamia, from 2,500 years before Christ, already these oldest pieces of our cultural tradition are already part of petro history. And there are UNESCO sites with various oil connections, such as in Baku. Since antiquity, oil and gas is reported to be found here, and until today, the city stages this history in signature buildings. One historical signature building is the so-called Maiden Tower at the UNESCO site of the historic city of Baku. No one actually knows what it was built for. Quite obviously, not for fortification. The strange and very sophisticated pipe system in the walls, which you see on the right side, in a kind of an X-ray reconstruction. This pipe system and the wells beneath the structure give good reason to speculate about the whole place being a medieval chemical laboratory, or maybe one of the biggest medieval refineries in the world. So again, history of oil and gas in UNESCO World Heritage without anyone knowing it.
So gas fires were used for various religious cults in Baku and have been used since antique times. The most famous one is the Zoroaster temple that we can see here on the upper left image in a drawing from the 18th century. The nobles, the Nobel brothers, who were actually the brothers of the famous Nobel of the Nobel Prize, who opened the largest, at that time, largest petroleum excavating company in the old world, in Baku, even made the Zoroaster temple their brand, as you can see in the lower left corner, while at the same time exhausting the temple's natural gas reservoirs nearby, as you can see in the upper right corner. The extraction, the towers, the wells grew very, very close and eventually, so to say, closed down the natural gas pipe connections, and also endangered the structure of the whole building. And then only in 1964 it was restored and then put into action again, but with artificial lower right image, how it's until today a museum and a national heritage site. And even today's liquid petromodern signature buildings, so characteristic for the self-representation of contemporary Azerbaijan, reflect the flames of the Atashgar temple, as you can see here, in a photograph by Rena Effendi, an artist, photographer, and artist who was born in Baku and used to work for the oil company, actually, or for the oil industry as a young woman before she started to become an artistic commentator and chronicler, and one of the probably the best known artists from Azerbaijan.
Everyone knows this UNESCO World Heritage Site, German concentration camp Auschwitz. More than 1 million people, Jews, Poles, Romani people, and members of many other nationalities were killed here industrially. Not so well known is, in fact, that a major part of the complex and of the so-called extermination through labor was the petrochemical industry, a huge petrochemical plant here by IG Farben. And one attempt to memorialize the multiple petromodernities of this darkest chapter of German history was a suggestion of the artists Rudolf Herz and Reinhard Matz to build a performative motorway memorial in the middle of Germany. Cobbled paving and a speed limit of 30 per hour for 1 kilometer in the middle of the German highway system.
But to cast a somewhat brighter image of the petromodern remembrance and memorial site culture, I would like to talk about the Tempelhof airfield in the middle of Berlin, where I'm sitting right now, as our last example. Conceived and initially built during the Nazi era, it was first the site of the famous air bridge during the Soviet-Russian blockade in 1948-49, a truly petromodern Cold War endeavor. But since its closing in 2008, after its closing, it was turned into a public park and largely left to itself, a vast and spectacular inner city post-industrial, post-petromodern wilderness with a variety of animal wildlife population and a plethora of outdoor leisure activities, as if it was Venice Beach.
So this was our little tour through beauty and horror of Petro memorials. And the floor is open for some questions. We have some minutes.
No, you have to ask a question to Finn now.
Yeah, what happened to the plan? When will we travel there?
Well, the idea of having this is started as a pre-project to see what we can do as a plan. Probably it will be starting the Draugen platform that could be moved is about 10 years ahead. And the whole preparation for this Tampen area to become a World Heritage will be accelerating as platforms are stopping their production. So it will be in 10 years' time. We need all the preparation to do whatever is needed to get it accepted by UNESCO, but we also need to do locally in Stavanger a place where we can visit and start telling the story about the condips and also telling the story of the oil production of Norway, which will probably end, as it looks now, by 2050. That year, I'm 100 years old, so I hope to see it.
So the plan is still alive.
Yeah, on Tuesday, 2 days ago, I was in one of the meetings with the Stavanger Kommune, the municipal of Stavanger, and they were happy about the idea, and they were going to do something to get the decision and get the project rolling, let's say before next summer. But the physical idea of having the heritage, you might say, in place to be able to visit it won't be until about 10 years. Unfortunately.
Well, 10 years.
Yeah. I mean, look how long did it take for the pyramids to join the World Heritage Program.
Or look at how long it took for the new Berlin airport to open. But yeah. I you know, maybe it will turn into a heritage site very sooner than people expect. But I was wondering, because you said you referred to the Draugen platform as the Eiffel of Norway's Eiffel Tower. I was wondering how many people share this view. Do you think it's like a common view are Norwegian people aware of the beauty and also what's the word, Erhabenheit?
Well, I think that a lot of, you might say, engineers love the idea of seeing concrete structures like that. I don't know if everybody, at least on the eastern coast or eastern part of Norway, really feel the same about the oil. On the other hand, it would be great to have a platform like that very close to shore so people could see what it actually was. I think by the time when this project will be going, more people will look at it as history and not necessarily production going on, polluting, and all the, you might say, the bad things about it, which is coming up right now.
Yeah.
Everybody think Norway has become rich because of the oil. Of course, we become rich, but we were a fairly advanced nation before oil struck us, to put it that way.
So anybody else has a question to Finn for the moment? I guess we will come back to the topic.
Comment. You talked about Lykkeland as a picture. The next episode perhaps will end up with something like the concrete structures, I hope. Because the first part, the first season, was without the concrete structures. Let's hope we can.
Yeah, it was on the ocean Viking, huh? It was on the original
that was
first.
not concrete. That was a steel structure.
Yeah. That was old-fashioned American technology, anachronistic technology.
Yes.
Well,
So,
perfect.
Exactly.
Perfect bridge.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Lykkeland, that's the title of our next chapter or part. So for that, I want to introduce again, let's say, Julia Leder. She's a professor of film studies at NTNU in the Technical University in Trondheim, but she's also a member of the Energy Humanities Research Group at NTNU and the Petroaesthetics Collaboratory at Oslo School of Environmental Humanities. I was hoping that you can tell us a little bit about this. It sounds very interesting. I don't know anything about that. She's doing a large research project on the representation of culture, petromodernity on television shows, and as I understood, also in its kind of petromodern, petroculture comparative way in different countries. But right now she's concentrating on rather recent TV series that were produced in Norway, and makes sense to also be in Norway then. But right now she is in Munich at the Rachel Carson Center for Environment and Society on a research leave, and will be there until February. And so this is why she can't be here in person, but we now welcome you from Munich. Please go ahead, Julia.
Thank you very much, Alexander and Benjamin, for inviting me, and thanks to the Kunsthall also for hosting this now almost completely virtual event. But it's nice to see. It's nice to see the old Kunsthall. Yeah, I can talk a bit more about the Critical Petroaesthetics project. That's a very new project that just started up actually a couple of months ago. And I see that Sissel, our leader, Sissel Furuset, is in the list of attendees. She works at the University of Oslo, and this is a program that the OSEH, the Oslo School of Environmental Humanities, has created, where they encourage Oslo University-based professors to produce bigger networks and research groups outside of their institutions. So we have members there from Trondheim, and also from University in Agder, and Oslo Met, and some other institutions, as well as the Rachel Carson Center here in Munich. So we have a website. Maybe Sissel can throw that up in the chat at some point during the evening. But we are at this point doing a kind of reading group, and we're also sort of strategizing about applying for research project funding and things like that. So keep your eyes open, and we'll come up with some plans to dominate the world at some point. Sorry.
I said very good.
Yeah, very good. Maybe good. Maybe better us than the others. Yeah, I will share my screen now and run a short presentation. My internet here in this apartment is very come and go, so I hope it's going to work okay. The reason I recorded it is for that exact reason, because you just never know with this this internet. So I'll run this, and then we'll show a short clip.
So if it doesn't work properly, we'll take over.
Yeah, tell me if it's acting dodgy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Here we go. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for inviting me. I pre-recorded this talk partly so that I would make sure that I didn't run over time, but also because in this apartment. So please bear with me if it feels a little bit canned. I want to talk through a little bit of the topic from the perspective of my own research. This talk will outline some of my current and future work into the absences and presences of the oil and gas industry in contemporary Norwegian film and television. One notable feature of the two TV representations of Norwegian patrocultures that I want to talk about today is that they have ventured into both the possible future and the recent past, which makes me think a bit more deeply about the screen temporalities in our current Anthropocene era. It feels like our position in the television timeline of the past half century or so is a moment of transition from a kind of invisibility of oil to its visibility. Yet at the same time, there are more and more reasons to try to repress or eliminate oil from Norwegian cultural narratives. So I'll just look at a couple of interesting examples here and talk through it. I've previously worked on the TV series Occupied, the Norwegian 3 seasons up till now drama that takes place in the near future. I've written an article previously about the series or climate fiction and the ways that this series, I think, signals a kind of awareness of and repression of the problems of climate change that are a result of the Norwegian oil industry, as well as the wider fossil fuel industries around the world. A current project I'm doing now is to pay attention to the series Lykkeland, or State of Happiness, as the British version is called, which debuted on NRK in 2018. The series opens in late 1969 Stavanger at the start of the North Atlantic oil boom and traces the effects of the oil industry and its enormous success on the wider society of Norway. So one of the kind of cultural, I think the dominance, the cultural and economic dominance of the state oil company, Statoil, which recently changed its name to Equinor. In preparation for the name change, they produced a really high production values, gorgeous, emotional video about why they're changing their name and rebranding away from Statoil into the new name Equinor. Obviously, this was a landmark event. They explained that in preparation for a future that must rely less on petroleum, they're expanding their portfolio into renewable energies and so on. The name performs a kind of greenwashing by replacing the word oil from the name with the more clean and progressive image of Equinor. Obviously, this is an act of greenwashing, and the website also references those accusations and tries to defend the name change. If there's time, we can also run the clip.
Dette forandrer oss. Og dette.
Yeah, and the website here.
We have time for the clip.
Okay, let me try to bring it back.
Especially since we forgot to play the trailer.
Yeah, we need to do that.
I don't know. We have the clip at the end, but we need to see the Equinor clip. It's really impressive.
Dette forandrer oss. Og dette.
It's not in the main screenshot size now. Sorry, guys. This worked during the practice, of course.
I think you have to go into presentation mode again. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I just don't want it to. Yeah. So one of the kind of cultural contexts for
Dette forandrer oss. Og dette. Og dette. Nordsjøen. Og i 46 år har både vi og landet vårt opplevd store endringer. som har krevd mye av mange. Men det har også gitt oss mye tilbake. Men noen endringer er så store at de endringer som krever at vi finner balansen mellom å ta vare på det vi har, og investere i det vi bare har sett starten på. Det vi er, og det vi skal bli. Og når vi nå går fra å være et olje- og gasselskap til å bli et bredt energiselskap, er det naturlig at vi også endrer navnet vårt. Noe annet ville vært helt ulikt Statoil. Equinor.
Yeah, and the website here basically cops to the accusation of greenwashing and tries to say that it's not all bad. The fact that they are trying to move away from oil. Things that I find interesting about this series, Lykkeland, is it also tries to complicate the understanding of oil and petroleum in the sort of history and cultural history, and I think that that's an actually really important task. And given the very few examples of series that take on this story, I think Lykkeland is trying to do several quite complicated things. One of the things that Lykkeland is doing is blending in an acknowledgement and a representation of the extreme devout Christian context of that region in Norway, of Stavanger. Along with the incredible importance and exploration that began around Christmas time in 1969. So I wanted to look particularly at a clip from the end of the second episode of season 1 of Lykkeland. This is a montage which shows the men, all men at this point, working on the oil rig where the first strike occurs. And the montage is beautiful and inspiring. And interestingly, it uses as a musical bridge a classic Christian hymn called Deilig er jorden. And this is traditionally a Christmas song. I've also transcribed some of the lyrics in the next slide in English and Norwegian for us to consider as well. But I produced this montage out of stills from the episode.
Okay. So we're going to actually show the clip itself now. Yeah. I will just open the other file.
Open a bit more! More!
I kveld kunne oljearbeiderne for første gang se gassen brenne fra flammebommen på Ocean Viking. Det er fortsatt uvisst hvor mye olje det dreier seg om, men enkelte hevder at dette feltet er det største reservoaret som noensinne er funnet under vann. Skulle dette vise seg å stemme, vil de økonomiske konsekvensene være uante.
So did that clip work okay?
Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Woohoo, success. So yeah, the reason I wanted to include that obviously was for the visual and audio and performative aspects of Christianity and the Christian hymn. The colors in that clip are golden light and beautiful, and there's sort of a halo effect even around several of the characters as they witness the kind of epoch-changing moment in the oil industry in Norway. So I think that's a really significant moment in the first season. And I hope that it's going to dovetail in an interesting way with some of the other topics that we're going to discuss tonight. Do you guys want to open it up or move to another commenter?
Yeah,
No,
thanks a lot.
I think yeah, thank you, Julia. So where do we start? Does anybody in our round have a question for the time being? I'm still again, first thing that comes to my mind when I see this, which seems to be like kind of the Norwegian TV commentary on its oil history, I immediately have to think of Dallas and how this may be related. I looked it up and I found out that Dallas actually starts 10 years later, so it really starts in the present, which is interesting. So here it starts at the beginning in 1969, just before it starts, and there it starts actually in a time when already everything has gotten into a deep crisis, but we don't see the crisis, but we see all these beautiful cars and soap opera things going on. But in a way, still I have the feeling that like the feel of the whole Lykkeland series is also, I think you also told me that people were criticizing that it was too soapy or something, but I found it fantastic, as soapy as it is. And I wonder what is the relationship and how, how is it, how does it, this kind of temporality, what does it produce and how is it linked to the specific era? In the trailer that we haven't seen, there's this beautiful sentence by the politician who says, "We are living in the best and most exciting times that ever were here at this exactly this place." And this, I mean, what a statement!
Right.
In Stavanger, which was introduced as this remote, very old-fashioned, fallen out of time place, and then suddenly it is the place in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think I didn't introduce my research as fully as I originally thought, but what I'm looking at in the series especially is the way it's a retrospective view, right? I mean, it's 50 years ago from today, more or less, and what's important to me in the work that I'm doing is the fact that this is one of two major TV series that have ever been produced in Norway about the oil industry. There was also a soap in the 90s, but it was more of a backdrop from what I understand. And so there's a sort of
terrible.
Yeah, I heard it was terrible. I want to watch it at some point, but my Norwegian's not good enough to understand it yet, so I have to wait until. But yeah, like suddenly there's two high prestige drama type TV series, super expensive, like the two most expensive TV series ever produced by a Norwegian TV in the 21st century now. So the timeliness of that is one of the temporalities I'm looking at, but also thinking about something like the melodrama and the heritage film and the different film genres and television genres that play into Lykkeland and that kind of overlap and help to develop the emotional connection and the emotional appeal that I think it's trying to build, because it's asking us to sympathize with a whole large ensemble of characters, not only one or two, but a large cast. And it's also asking us to put ourselves in their position before climate change is a major global crisis. Yeah, so to think about the happiness and the joy and the blessedness of this moment, and I think that montage brings that home. If you watch the series, and I think a lot of the Norwegians who are attending have seen at least it, probably, there's a lot more interesting ways that it looks at the impact of this moment on of different characters from different walks of life and different ages and genders, importantly too.
Could I comment?
Yeah, of course.
As one who has really lived through that life and that period, I also used to work at the Oil Museum, and the last part was playing up the myth that never was real life. But it's unfortunately given some people an idea which is not really correct. The series, by the way, is much less glorification as the ones you showed. But it's also, the most criticized we heard in Stavanger was that they didn't speak the Stavanger dialect. But I think it's a fairly true story about it, and it's also showing, you might say, as you said, the difference between the Christianity of Stavanger and the region compared to the new world of getting the Americans and the international flair into it. But it was a very distinct change in the life of Stavanger, no matter how you put it. The only thing is that the Americans talked about the little fish village of Stavanger, which the Americans thought they should have extra money to go to Stavanger to produce the oil. But that's another story. But I agree with you, there's a lot of the industry, like Equinor likes to greenwash a lot of the things that maybe should have be more seriously discussed in Norway than it is at the moment.
So from our comparative perspective, we always had the feeling that Norway, despite all the ambivalences that you get into automatically when you're dealing with this substance, has almost from the beginning acted very consciously, much more consciously, and also more thinking about the future than almost any other country. And I found it quite remarkable in the series that I didn't read it that, it only shows, like you said, Finn, that it only shows the glory and the beauty of it and the happy prospects. Even the Christmas scene is at the same time kind of melancholic and problematic if you have followed the different characters. And you follow all this discussion about how actually the state is obliged to take over the industry in order to take responsibility and to make it more benefit, like a discussion that has been going on in the beginning of the Soviet Union, where they decided against oil industry, saying that it's monopolistic and it only turns out badly, so to say. So that is also an undertone that is quite interesting. And then definitely the fact that the main characters are actually women. I mean, they are the most interesting characters in the series, and it actually ends with this woman leaving Stavanger to Bergen to study and saying, okay, you have to go here if you meet your smart girlfriend. And she also leaves the oil business in a way, it looks like. And it was just like, how do you say, a transition. But I think using the word transition, I'm sure we will come back to these questions because we only have one more part, and then we come back to the sum up, bringing everything together part anyway. But to stay in our schedule, I would propose that we now move to the next part, which is, nation rebuilding. So it's very close to it, actually. And I would like to give over to Benjamin to introduce Gunhild Button.
Yeah, Gunhild Button, who we welcome here, is an Oslo-based artist and artistic researcher. She describes herself as a performer and a teacher in the visual art didactics. The material medium of her sculptures is often ceramics, and porcelain, which I find very interesting. She uses it in somehow technical objects at places where you wouldn't expect it. And we came across her work because she also uses technical imagery that you wouldn't expect, for example, on a porcelain and on a nostalgic memorial plate, an oil rig, for example. And about this work, she will talk here. Thanks, Gunhild. The floor is yours.
And the screen.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would like to share a screen with you for my presentation. And I hope you can see this now. I'll just... There. Thank you for inviting me to this very interesting event. I think it's been very nice to follow so far. And I just love the title of it, Plankton and Drill Head. I'm an artist, as you said, and I will talk about my project, which is called The Ambivalence of Oil Aesthetics, which is an artistic research project that has been part of the Oslofjord Ecologies project, and also a book that came out recently. This all started first when I discovered these images of this platform, the Ocean Viking, also the same platform as we just saw the clip from. So this is a couple of years before when it was actually built. And what interested me is when I discovered it was actually built in the middle of Oslo center, right before the city hall in the Aker Mechanical Shipyard. And the shipyard is actually part of the UNESCO's heritage list. But I think it was amazing to see it here, right in front of the city hall, and also at the very spot where I usually get off the ferry every morning when I go to work. I think that the platform, when it was built, it must have been a very spectacular view. Such a great construction in the center of Oslo. And to me, these images, they seems like an aesthetic expression of optimism and enthusiasm related to the Norwegian oil extraction. Oil have been the source of an immense riches for the oil companies as well as for our country. And within a few years, Norway was transformed into a great welfare state, but also an oil-dependent economy. The images that oil companies use to promote their activity, they are appealing, and they represent something more than just the historical images. These images emphasizes our national heritage as a successful nation. Not only are these platforms illuminated by a beautiful sunset, the oil field is also named after Johan Sverdrup, which is considered as the former of the Norwegian parliamentarism. Both the images and the names emphasizes the cultural and ideological hegemony of Norway as a successful democracy and a welfare state. The oil companies are using national symbols as names like Ocean Viking, Snorre, Gullfaks, and not to mention Johan Sverdrup, which emphasizes the platform as a national symbol of democracy, welfare, and equality. The platform has, in a way, turned into a national icon. Besides having visual similarities with former Norwegian national treasures, they are also named as one, like Ocean Viking. I have worked with this art project over several years, and I chose to use the commemorative plates as a national heritage and the uniting symbol of Norway as an oil nation. The platform images are exposed on porcelain plates to create a proud national identity that kind of involves everyone. Oil treasures. The government and oil industry, they have turned this activity into something that we are proud of, that involves everyone, as well as something we benefit from and therefore are also dependent of. But it occurs to me that there is an ambivalence between this glorious story of oil treasures and national heritage and the dystopic vision expressed through the black smoke coming out of the flame. So the ambivalence of oil aesthetics. I want to tell a different story. I wanted to question the gap between the ideological hegemony of black smoke is pointing at. This ethical dilemma led to a new art project for me actually, named the Sacrament of Penance, which this small porcelain sculpture in the middle is a part of. I chose to use the Sacrament of Penance as a method and artistic approach to reflect upon a personal feeling of guilt concerning Norway's role as an oil nation. There won't be time to explain this project though, not here, but I still wanted to end this presentation by asking this question. Has the national identity as an oil nation and successful welfare state turned us into accomplices in a collective guilt? And if you would like to read the article, it's free for download on this website. And I'll stop sharing the screen now. Thank you.
Thank you, Gunhild. We proceed as follows. Siri will have the stage or the screen right now next to kind of response and say more about this pride and guilt question from her perspective. But before she starts, I want to shortly introduce her. At the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, again here at NTNU in Trondheim. She's a trained philosophy, and as such, she wears fascinating hats. She's director of NTNU Ocean and associate professor of applied ethics at NTNU at the same time. I would actually love to hear a little bit more besides her response about what NTNU Ocean actually does. Just a side note. She will reply to Gunhild and then continue. Well, I already said that. Okay, so please, Siri, the screen is yours. I can't even see you, but this is probably my thing.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, because you're here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Great.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction, Alexandra, and thank you so much for inviting me to this fascinating event. It's a very interesting topic, I think, for all Norwegian, if they've known what we're talking about here, because I think it's something that affects us all and our identity, both individually and collectively. So you wanted me to say a little bit about my role right now at the university. As you said, I'm a professor of applied ethics, and my background is in philosophy. I have a PhD in like traditional philosophy, more or less, but I've worked in applied ethics and corporate responsibility and things like that since I did my PhD about 10 years ago. And as of January this year, I've been leading the cross-disciplinary research area at NTNU called NTNU Oceans, which is sort of an attempt to make all the researchers working in ocean-related matters at the NTNU to work more together and to work more cross-disciplinary. So trying to get Julia here to work to put her into the biologists and just see what happens. So it's a fascinating job, I would say. But more specifically, I was put here to comment a little bit on Gunhild's presentation and on this concept of guilt, and also as an applied ethicist, of course, the concept of guilt is interesting to me. But when it comes to oil in Norway, I think it's always connected with pride. It's this kind of ambivalence that Gunhild talked about and described very well, I think, that comes up whenever we are talking about our oil fortune or our petroleum fortune, and this combination of feeling pride that we were able to do something good for us as a nation, because as we know, a lot of countries have not been able to do that, and the sense of pride that we have sort of put these natural resources into building a welfare society that is relatively speaking very well functioning, and that we consider ourselves sort of a good nation in terms of values and so on, and we see the oil as somehow contributing to that. But of course, at the same time, this fortune is a kind of a dirty fortune. It's kind of a smudged. It's already kind of a sense, it's kind of a Protestantic sense of guilt of being sort of fortunate. It's this, I don't know if you know this, Gunhild, this project Scandi Guilt. It's also a project from the University in Oslo. And I think this Scandi Guilt concept is quite interesting. It's general. It's not only for the fortunate oil nation Norway. It's general for this Scandinavian countries that have done so well in terms of building a welfare state, and that also makes us feel guilty in a sense. But of course, in Norway, this Scandi guilt is particularly tied up with the fact that we have built our fortune on something that's so that turns out more and more to be so dreadfully damaging for the planet. And I think this ambivalence, I've seen it one place described as a collective ethical dissonance. It's something that sort of disturbs us every time we talk about this. This is something that we at least I perceive also in the Lykkeland series, for example. What Benjamin and Alexander and I discussed a little bit when we talked before this event was how the fact that we feel pride about the fact that we've been able to build the welfare society with, among other things, the income that we'd had from the oil, but also the fact that we've even been able to put some aside, say for later generations, which is also very Protestantic and virtuous of us. We put it in this incredible oil fund. I wanted actually to show the website of the oil fund. I don't know if we're able to share the screen and do that, because it always, this image always fascinates me when sometimes if you can do, every Norwegian can do that. If you feel a bit blue one day, you can just log on to the webpage of the oil fund and see what kind of flashes on the screen, this gigantic fortune that belongs to all of us.
The problem is that it sometimes goes down as well.
Yeah, but it doesn't only count up, but the number is so insane. So it always makes you feel kind of rich anyway, right? Yeah. But then it strikes back and you feel, why? Why do we have all this when there's so many poor people in the world, and why is this saved only for us? And I think this concept is also there with the way we've invested this oil fund. Because the ethical sort of guidance that came in place, what is the ethical foundation of the oil fund to begin with, was that, okay, so we need to, there we have it. Oh, you don't even see the first number, do you?
It's 10.
It's 10. It shouldn't be a 0 there. It's 10, and then all those incredible numbers after that. And it says below, it says for you and future generations. So that is the basic ethical foundation of the oil fund, that we shouldn't spend it all at once. We should save some for those who come after us. But then, of course, we have this kind of collective ethical dissonance. What have we done to deserve this? And also, of course, what are we doing? What have we been doing to the earth while exploring this? So at some point, this came up as a kind of a demand in the population, by politicians, by NGOs and so on, that we should invest the fund in a responsible way, maybe to feel less guilty. So we should put some ethical guidelines in place. We shouldn't invest in bad stuff. We shouldn't invest in weapons, tobacco, all the things that could harm. And we shouldn't invest in environmentally damaging industries, which is already a kind of a paradox, right? Those ethical guidelines have been attempted to, and I think the best part about this whole process is that it's been very sort of open. It's been a part of a Norwegian public debate ever since these guidelines were, or even before the guidelines were put in place. It's something that brings up this pride and guilt dissonance, I think, in the public discussion. But then something else comes in the past year is that we need to invest it sustainably, also for economic reasons. So one of the last things that came in place was a ban towards investing in petroleum, and that's when this when I told you about this, that's when you mentioned this quote: "I refuse to join any club that would have me as a member." That's kind of the way Norway is using. We have built this fortune on petroleum, but we won't invest it in petroleum, which is, in a sense, it makes perfect sense. But it's also this thing about Norway. We don't really identify with all other petroleum producing countries necessarily. We feel like we're something else. We're doing things in a different and a better way. So that even when Statoil started branching out and going into other parts of the world, we felt that we would do that with bringing something with us that's bringing Norwegian values, doing things the way it should be done. So again, a sense of pride with what we have done with it, but always mixed up with this sense of guilt. Yeah, I think I'll stop there and then we can just continue the conversation.
Thank you. You know, we looked up where the Norwegian oil fund is investing and found out that it's for example, investing in all 5 of the apocalyptic riders. So the big alphabet, what is it? Google, Apple. In all, you have a lot of money in that, and you know we can definitely start to discuss whether this is so ethical or not. But you know, if we continue believing that the digital will be the clean future, then maybe it is. But we would, before we start with our final discussion, Benjamin and I would like to present our second and last interlude to you, which is about petromodern nation rebuildings around the world and also around time. And it will start, if you're ready, Benjamin, with a nation that you maybe wouldn't expect in the choir of oil extracting nations that we are talking about today.
Yes. It is the nation of Austria. And also we have a kind of strange Christian legacy, but not Protestant. There are no Protestants in Austria. There are only Catholics. And here we see the St. Stephen's Cathedral, which is the sign for Vienna, and just in front of the let's say the doors of Vienna, there once was the biggest oil field in the whole of Central Europe. And interestingly, because of this, also Austria has some deep connection between the political political history and oil. But compared to Norway, no one really knows here about this connection. And as in Norway, a state-owned company became the most important player, but for quite other reasons than in Norway. In what is now Austria, an oil boom took place in the 30s with immediate Nazi German interest. Here we see celebrations of the biggest by then internal German oil wells, also here in the Vienna Basin. But after the war, the oil fields were part of the Soviet zone of Austria. Here we see nice Austrian village names written in Cyrillic letters, because they're also names of oil fields. But to get the sovereignty back in 1955, the country and its oil needed to stay neutral between East and West. So this is the reason why no international company was allowed to drill here by the Austrian State Treaty. So the reason why the industry here is state-owned is really big history. It's not a decision, not an internal decision, but big diplomatic decision. To produce here, only state-owned Österreichische Mineralölverwaltung, OMV, which is now nicely active in Stavanger, it was run for decades by both important political parties, so by the Socialist and by the Conservative Party. Exploration and production was Conservative black, and the refinery was Socialist red. And the fact that this treaty was signed was due to the fact that in the late 40s, this biggest oil field of Central Europe was found and developed with Soviet technology. And interestingly, with the same Soviet technology that we see here in our second example in China. Soviet technology, Stalinets caterpillars to move rigs in the 1970s, shown in the film by Dutch filmmaker Joris Iden. We see these caterpillars too on propaganda posters here in the background. Not at least this oil from Daking made the great leap forward possible, from a remote agricultural state to a high-tech and space nation just in one generation. Our next example.
Yeah, now we move to the GDR. The GDR had its very specific own kind of energy utopia related to oil that also not many people are aware of today. That was when the Družba friendship pipeline was built in the late 1950s and early 1960s. And at the beginning, still in the era of Khrushchev, there was the hope that the GDR could turn into a clean, environmental aware, high-tech state by not using coal anymore, but by transitioning from coal to the cheap Russian oil, and then using its advanced petrochemistry, which was the most advanced petrochemistry in the Eastern Sphere, and producing high-tech products for the world market and so on. But this utopia hasn't become true, because after Khrushchev was torn down by his successor, Brezhnev decided that the Cold War was more important, and that it was more important to get a lot of money from the Western states. So instead, they sold it also to their brother states to quite expensive prices, other than the normal myth goes. And so the GDR had to go back to coal, and this is how actually in the next 3 decades it developed as it has developed, becoming. What we see here is a collection of large mosaics in Bitterfeld, which was very strongly connected to this utopia because it's one of the petrochemical, or used to be one of the petrochemical centers of the former GDR. On the wall, also, it's very representative, I would say, for the aesthetics of socialist countries, in many socialist countries, and it depicts something like a succession from a feudal society on the first 2 plates to a modern industrial society here, and then the last one based on chemistry and petrochemistry. You see the industrial sites in the background and the happy, well-off families in the foreground. So that is, so to say, the image of the realistic socialism as it actually has taken place. And as we are already in, sorry, I have to look for it a while. As we are already in the socialist sphere, I want to take over the screen. I think you have to first, yeah, exactly, and show you a short clip from a quite fascinating documentary by a Swiss filmmaker on a place that is also not very well known because it is not even shown on Google Maps today, which is called Neftashlari, the oil rocks, which is 60 kilometers offshore from Baku in the Caspian Sea, an oil extraction site that was developed by the Soviets right after the Second World War. The history I already mentioned that at the beginning of the Soviet Union, they had a specific energy utopia, but that was linked to electricity, as we all know. So, the famous sentence by Lenin, but the electricity was produced by coal and even peat, and the oil from Baku and the oil fields in Grozny, the other oil fields didn't exist yet at that time, was exported mainly to the Western states to then use the money to buy coal, which was much cheaper for the Soviets at that time. Then later they detected that it was necessary to use their own oil for the war, actually, to fuel the war. And then after the war, they began to systematically explore their own area and struck these large oil fields in Siberia, mainly, and soon became one of the 3 largest oil extracting countries of the world. So somehow what we see here in this film, which the documentary uses original material from a documentary from the 1952, I think, is kind of a invention or a rebuilding of the Soviet nation as an oil nation. Oh shit! Sorry, I forgot. Oh yeah. You hear the sound?
Мы ее смарт-свободна,
Okay, you take over again, Benjamin. So from the depths of the sea, we will extract oil at any cost. That's definitely another claim, I would say, than the one that Norway had in 1970. So we come to the last section, and of course, we have to somehow touch the US in this presentation, being it the motherland of oil modernity. So in the US, it started in the middle of the 19th century, but the images that we are showing now are from a film, which is maybe the film of Petromodernity, Giant, from 1956, that historizes or that tells the history of Texas. So it tells the nation rebuilding of Texas in the late 1920s and early 1930s. So there was a row of oil crazes in the United States that started in, what is it, Pennsylvania, isn't it? No, I don't. It's Pennsylvania.
Yes, it started in Pennsylvania.
But then the most important fields are in California around 1900, then in Oklahoma in the 1910s, and then Texas, the by then largest oil fields, starting in the late 1920s. And every time you have this kind of transition, which is always also the topic of Western. So here you also have these Western themes, but here the transition is from cattle to oil. And what comes out of it is, please the next slides, what comes out of it is this kind of exuberant hyper lifestyle that maybe is mostly connected to petromodernity and the American way of life when we started thinking about it before, you know, like widening the picture, which then maybe looks like this, where you have also all these anachronisms. You have different times there and different places of the world at the same time, all under the flag of this new richness. Can you please show the next slide? Here you can also see beautiful, you have the plane, you have the car, you have the horses, and you have the cowboy hats. And then the last one, yeah, exactly. So, okay, that was our short
tour around the world.
Tour de force around the petromodern world. Yeah.
With failed states from Austria to the US.
Come on, you can't say that. That's too harsh. Okay, so now we are at the beginning of the last section. The question is whether we want to proceed with our plan and look at these banknotes again, or if we just want to start, you know, with the questions. And also, I would like to invite all of you who are invisibly listening and watching us to signal if you want to take part visibly. Then you will be invited and presented visibility by the host, and we can also see you, and you can actively partake in this final discussion. So what do you think, Benjamin?
Well, I mean, nicely, Finn already showed one of the other banknotes, and so it's not only ways to think about the oil industry in money, and the Plankton and Drill Head is one type. The other type would be to think with these huge structures, and I think maybe it is interesting to have still maybe some images on the screen to come a little bit back to that topic, but this doesn't hinder us from walking through all the topics of this evening and come back to every question. So I think a mixture. Let's maybe you show one picture and we just go around and collect questions. Who wants to?
Please also have a look at the chat. I'm just preparing the presentation of the last things in the background.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing in connection with where you ended up with this, talking about this transition from kettle to oil in the US setting. So of course, this is also the big question here in Norway now. There's the transition going on, although one can discuss what the time perspective is, but of course we are transitioning towards the post-carbon era. So the question is all the time, what will be the new oil? So every time a new promising industry or anything comes up in the Norwegian context, is always the new oil.
Like the New Jerusalem.
Yeah.
In the old times,
exactly.
It was the New Jerusalem. Now it's the new oil.
Yep.
Well, of course, we were also fascinated by this, especially since you have the story that before the oil there was something else. I mean, the oil was the new fish or something, the new whale, probably. The oil was the new whale. Right?
Still about some form of oil then. But no, I've seen, and speaking of the digital large companies as part of this transition, one of the things that's most frequently mentioned as the new oil in Norway is our personal data, which because we have so much of it and it's worth so much, so we can actually live just from that in the future, apparently.
And this clock goes up even faster. But Finn wants to say something.
Yeah, there's this difference between the giant and Lykkeland. They all talk about, and you see how you might say the societies changes differently between Norway and the American culture. And also, I'd like to comment on the difference that is notable. I think when Benjamin and Alex came to Stavanger, they went to the oil museum, and the first you see entering the oil museum is a wreck of a platform known as the Alexander Kielland. It's the first picture you see when you get into the oil platform. And the Americans that come to say, do you really tell that story, that it's dangerous, that it's killed people? You wouldn't be allowed to do that in Texas. One of the lecturers at the conference we went to said, if I told my students that oil had, caused problems like lives and so on, I would be fired from the university. And maybe that's a different story on how Norway, the Norwegian society, has treated the whole story and telling you might say the full story at least, based on a dangerous job it is to extract oil as well, not just the glorification of it.
But it's still a heroic. I mean, you can't be a hero without danger, so that's why you need a danger.
Well, I mean, you wouldn't like to kill 123 people and tell as a glorious story, I think.
Yeah.
I'm just doing it in the background. Don't be bothered too much. No, but the self-reflexiveness interests me because, of course, even though in Texas at the oil museums there, I think they have 3 large institutions, oil museums. Even though you might not be allowed, here are the whales, to talk about dangers and victims, which I think from a European perspective, not only from a Norwegian perspective, looks kind of weird. It looks like maybe you would expect that in an Eastern dictatorship, but not in a free Western country, I would say. Then you have all these other cultural productions that show this kind of reflexiveness, and of course show all the disasters. I mean, how many disasters were shown and produced by Hollywood and were anticipated actually by Hollywood? So you always have this kind of critical voice at the same time, I would say. And even a soap like Dallas in a way is more complex, or was more complex than what you were referring to in the Texas Oil Museum. So it's really like, I have the feeling it's like different societies in one country, like, I mean, like we just had in this election.
I see here now a question by Martin Bach. Can Martin Bach, do you want to I can read it to you, but maybe Carl, you open the door for Martin Bach. Is the Norway's claim to Queen Maud land in the Antarctic related to oil or to other natural resources?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Is the Norway's claim to Queen Maud land in the Antarctic related to oil or other natural resources?
Originally, all the Norwegian activity around the South Pole was because of the hunting for whales. And I guess whale oil was very important in about 1850. I guess it's oil related, but not necessarily the same type of oil that we're talking about today. Of course, they needed some place to, to land and to go ashore in the South Pole. And so since they were far away from home, they needed some islands and some areas.
For actually building also something like real refineries, I saw quite a depressing refinery in southern Georgia, or I don't know the name of these islands in the Atlantic Ocean. And this looked really, if you would not know that it's a whale refinery, it really looked like a petrochemical refinery with huge storage tanks, but at least
it's the Bouvet Island.
But at least at petrochemical plants, you don't have all the skeletons laying around.
I have two things that I would like to bring up. Both kind of came up in the talk with Siri, but I think they are also to everybody else. The first one is the observation, or you said that actually people don't know these banknotes because nobody uses banknotes anymore. Everybody pays with digital money. And I was kind of fascinated by that, so you have this kind of big memorial endeavor, making the design competition and so on. And I mean, I showed you a couple of these designs and they were by different people, as you could also see, but in almost every one of these designs, oil showed up prominently. So most was about the sea, and then oil showed up prominently. So it obviously is a big topic, but then in the same moment that you start to make it really visible, to draw it out of invisibility, you do it on a medium that actually itself has just started to become completely invisible because physical money isn't used anymore very often. This is one observation, and I think it's an interesting question in the large area of the relationship between oil culture and this kind of material culture of the 20th century and the late 20th and probably future digital and more immaterial cultures, image cultures or whatever, or number cultures, like one chapter. So, it's like it has already become anachronistic. And my other observation maybe, or a question also is related to that, and especially also goes to Julia, and it's related to the question if maybe remembering Norway as an oil country is also a way of putting the focus on a very specific and very male-driven history. It's also in the drama of Lykkeland exactly this question somehow subverted in it, and whether it could also be told differently. Like you also said that in our talking, Siri, that there are people who say that actually the main reason for the economic success of Norway was not oil, but was that women were put into force. Of course, I don't know, but it'd be interesting. Oh, Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Yeah, I was gonna. Too bad it looks like this person has to leave, but she posted a really interesting question, and I think you were just touching on it, and that is kind of the cultural work that things like the banknotes are doing, but also things like Lykkeland, in a sense, producing a kind of a narrative that's accessible to the whole country or to the whole public of Norway, about oil and the meaning of oil and its significance and its past. And her question was about whether these, what did she say? Sorry. Examples of histories of petroculture aesthetics and storytelling can help us formulate a future of renewable energies. And I think that's exactly the work that Lykkeland is doing now. It's kind of weird that it's only starting now, at least in a public popular culture forum like television. But I think that's part of that's my theory anyways, that's part of the impulse behind making Lykkeland and starting to, I guess, kind of, to use a kind of psychology term, like processing the meaning of oil for and how we can learn from the experience of the generation that's portrayed in that drama, who grew up, the Olje-unge, right, like the film in the Petro Museum, the way that the generations who grew up with oil have grown to see it in different ways, have grown to critique it, but also what lessons that can bring us as we go forward, right? I think gender is a huge part of that too. And if you watch the film Olje-unge, which we discussed in our Petroaesthetics collab, it's basically a father-son drama, right? There's no important women characters in it at all. So that's one of the things I really commend the female showrunners of Lykkeland, is for bringing in women's stories and talking about the way that women are also affected by the oil industry, even when they weren't working on the rigs or designing them at first, perhaps. Yeah, so I wanted to jump in there, but I'm afraid that that commenter has already left. But
I've left. I know she's a colleague of me, but I can see she's gone. I'm sure she would appreciate your answer. Maybe we can keep in contact later.
Just a question about the female in the oil. Have you talked to Marie van Kroog, who made an exhibition at the Oil Museum about the life onshore and offshore, where there's a more or less equal between the two genders? It should be interesting for you to have a look at that, or to inspect it at least.
And I think it's the thing you say about, because it's kind of, this series comes at the time when we are kind of on the verge of summing it up. So how did we get to where we are now, and how do we move forward? And in that sense, there's this those banknotes are the perfect medium, right? Because that's also kind of a bygone era. Nobody uses. We only use slips now, or bank cards, and we're not even allowed to use cash now because of the virus situations. So they become artifacts. They become sort of the perfect way of showing the past as well. Yeah.
But for you to remember that the whole series of these banknotes were about the sea and the ocean.
Yeah. And the cod, of course.
From the 50
cod
to the 1,000 kroner, it was all about the waves and the sea. And
which actually is very interesting, because I don't know if there's another people and country in Europe where it's so clear that, so to say, all the people are so much bound towards, this elementary space that is actually, not land and not easy or whatever, but it's, it's this kind of, this space that is actually not made for humans, this space of danger and so on.
That's a point of discussion. A lot of Norwegian historians that I know, they say that we always kept a distance to the sea. We've always been afraid of the sea, and those who have built the sense of Norwegian culture are really the farmers and the inland people, and the coast has always been something sort of dangerous and scary. I don't know.
Depending on which part of the country you come from. Well, of course, I was born on the east side among the farmers, and I now live among the fishermen or the oilmen. And it's quite a different, you might say, it's not necessarily the same people that lives in the east and the west. Maybe also because of the oil and the interest and the closeness to, might call it the richness or the wealth created by the oil. It's different from your sea point of from living in Hamar or living in Stavanger.
So who would claim the richness, the resources of water power, of inland water scenarios that you will very soon not only power all Norway by water, but also half of Europe in between, because there's so much water power, and you can actually use all the knowledge of building vast concrete structures that originally came from building these dams before it was applied to the oil rigs. Now you can use it to make even bigger dams. So who would claim that? The inland people or the sea people?
Well, it's divided in a different way, because the oil wealth is all the Norwegians. This is our wealth, but the wealth from water power is more connected with each lucky commune. So there's a difference between the rich municipalities in Norway that have the water power and the less rich that don't have it. So it's divided in a very different way.
By the way, transitions, you just talked about the water power to oil, and now we're using the technology from the oil business to build HAVAN or ocean windmills, wind turbines. So technologically,
and huge fish farms.
Yes, as well.
Yeah, I mean, of course, that was always the promise. I mean, I think it's kind of a law, so to say, technical historical law that it works like that. But also, this has been a promise or a subversive interpretation of oil technologies 50 years ago already, or even longer, that this will only be a transitional technology. I mean, yeah, of course, for nuclear energy, for example. So, the utopia actually was nuclear fused future, and oil would just lead the way towards there, because you need the amount of energy to get there. But yeah, this turned out to be wrong. Benjamin, you wanted to ask something.
I wanted to ask about this other huge energy player, Norsk Hydro. I think interestingly in the history of technology, there is already this electrical prehistory of Norwegian oil modernity, and already in the 20s, interesting innovations came already from hydropower from Norway, also in chemical industry. So there are many transitions and many parallel transitions, and maybe it's more a matter of how you tell these stories, and then you end up maybe with a mono causal story that you understand all the Norwegians as fishermen, but even if they aren't, or even if they aren't at all. So it's a way of storytelling and of telling different histories. But do you see this variety of histories and this big pool of histories to be be also explained as a resource, or because you one of you mentioned that future, or maybe our friend from Oklahoma told this, that the future needs this looking back into history to see all the showcases and, let's say, the good and the bad outcomes. So maybe this is a way to make history as a resource, but then we give history quite a logic sense, and then we want to yeah, then we are in this narrative that history is only there to learn something, and maybe this is then also some kind of a naive and maybe wrong concept of history, because history is gone.
Yeah, I think Norsk Hydro is a very good example, actually, because I've been writing about an article about how social responsibility, how when that comes up, Norsk Hydro is among the first companies in Norway to pick this up, and what they do is say, well, this is what we've always been doing, and then they sort of tell this whole story about how they move into the small fjords of Norway and transforms them, and brings with them not only economic growth but also building a society and so on. So and then that's also how they will go on in the future, even though they go global. Then they are building a sort of the global society and global sustainability. So it's kind of, so they are among the companies that at least I know that have sort of used their own history very much in that sense, saying that we have these values and we bring them with us into the future.
I think that's also actually quite a new development, because traditionally companies were always historyless and only looking to the future and, you know, burning their archives. So all the historians were always, you know, crying because the material was already gone. But now there are companies who are actively cultivating their history. I wanted to say we are at the end of our time now, so we agreed that we want to just leave open this Zoom thing for anybody who likes to continue chatting. But at the same time, so to say, the official slot is over, and if some of you people actually prefer to do something else now, then you may go. You may go. We thank you very much for attending this event, and yeah, hope we see you for real the next time. And thank you to you all. And like I said, I would happily continue to chat, and I will get a glass of wine for that now. But first, I wanted to say thank you and goodbye to everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks to Kunsthall Trondheim, and thanks to Goethe-Institut Oslo. And I raise a cup of Łukasiewicz memorial oil here in this glass. And it's one of the oldest Polish, and that means European, and that means in this case also of the industrial world, one of the oldest wells. And it's just tea, but Prost.
Skål. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, skål. So thanks, everybody. Maybe I'll